The year is 2001. You're 5, maybe 6 years old. Your parents just picked you up from school and, because it's a Friday, are finally taking you to the toy store like they promised. You're ecstatic. It's been a really long time since they took you there, and you cannot wait. After an agonizingly long car ride, you finally pull up to your local Toys R Us and begin your exploration. The store aisles are massive, filled to the brim with dozens upon dozens of toys. So many that it's becoming difficult for you to take it all in. You're wandering around the seemingly infinite spans of the building, vigorously running from side to side as more and more shiny treasures reveal themselves to you. And as you approach the Lego section and turn the corner, you suddenly see this. A brand new section that wasn't there the last time you came here, or at least you can't remember it. It looks unlike anything you've ever seen before, sticking out amongst the other Lego sets like a shining diamond in the rough. Instead of large boxes displaying vehicles or buildings, you see row after row of grey canisters adorned with colorful lids and illustrations of robot characters. The artwork mesmerizes you. Each of the 6 different canister designs seem to open a door into a strange and mysterious world that feels incredibly vast and sprawling. You don't know it yet, but this moment right here would go on to sear itself into your mind for the rest of your life and fundamentally alter your small brain's chemistry. So much so that even after all this time, you still have dreams about walking into a Toys R Us and exploring the shelves, filled with those same grey canisters, all of them carrying that one distinct name. Bionicle is one of the most legendary toy lines of all time and is widely regarded as the best theme that LEGO has ever made. The sheer dominance that these constructible action figures have had on early 2000s culture was insane, and seeing how most of you are in your late 20s or early 30s, I think everyone who clicked on this video has at least heard of Bionicle before. Running for almost 10 years, this toy line has converted millions of children into die-hard fans that still fondly remember the days of building and playing with the various different sets, myself very much included. But what most people actually do not know is that the legacy that Bionicle has nowadays almost wasn't meant to be. I know it's hard to imagine seeing how dominant they are today, but during the late 90s, LEGO was struggling badly. The stuff that made themselves so successful in the 80s and up to the early 90s simply did not interest this new generation of kids anymore, and so their sets simply weren't selling. The toys have become stale, and also the quality of the sets has worsened as a result, which prompted the now failing company to become desperate. They were basically throwing anything at the wall to see what sticks, and in that time, they released some very questionable lines and sets that have aged like spoiled milk. After years of failed attempts, 1999 saw the release of both the Slicers and the Robo-Riders themes. An early sign of what's to come, sure, but at the same time, way too abstract and confusing for the kids to understand. The designs were messy and the play functions were extremely bare bones and felt almost like an afterthought. And while their push into licensed sets with the 99 wave of Star Wars did help them briefly, it still was not enough to save the company from continuously losing money. But while the toys were failing commercially, LEGO did take away something very important from this period that would end up becoming their savior, and that was the marketing. During this time, LEGO experimented with a lot of new ways to market their new sets, besides the classic TV commercials and magazine adverts, especially when it came down to storytelling. Both the Slicers and Robo-Riders actually featured comic strips on the actual box art that would offer a small window into the theme's lore. Once again, this was very bare bones and basic, but it did end up becoming a major part of their new marketing strategy going forward. And so, during the development of the next major theme, they were ready to pull out all of the stops. After the turn of the millennium, LEGO would start laying the groundwork for a massive transmedia marketing campaign in preparation for the launch of the first wave of Bionicle sets in 2001. The commercials became a lot less sterile and more artistic, with a big focus on the characters and the so-called legend of the Bionicle that LEGO was trying to put into the minds of kids. Additionally, much like with their Slicers previously, a comic series written by veteran writer Greg Farshty and illustrated by Carlos Dianda and Randy Elliott was published published at the start of the first year. And these comics were absolutely incredible, a massive step up in quality when compared to the almost primitive efforts of the past. There was a real sense of maturity to these illustrations, but without ever losing the approachability and kid-friendly nature that made LEGO so beloved in the first place. But even with all of this fancy new media, the adverts and the comics weren't actually the core of this campaign. The real star of the show was the bionicle.com website. I firmly believe that this was one of the main reasons why people got so fixated on this toy line. The site was structured like an interactive lore book, offering tons of information about the story and the characters that were practically absent from the actual toys themselves. And that was very much by design, as every single piece of advertising directed you to this website. The comics had it printed right on the cover of every single issue. The narrator of the commercials spelled it out for you at the end of every showing. The physical stands in the toy stores were practically screaming the URL throughout the building. Hell, even the instruction manuals told you to go visit the website if you wanted to, quote, learn the truth about this universe. But amongst all the lore entries and stories, bionicle.com also included a software section predominantly advertised on the main page. A section that, when clicked, would link to a video game. You didn't even have to download the game. You could just play it in your browser thanks to the brand new Flash technology that was still uncharted territory at the time. A game simply titled the Matanui online game. The Matanui online game is really special. Not only is it an early example of the potential that Flash had as an engine, but it is also one of the best games ever made with it. The impact that this title had on the people who played it is immense, and to this day, the Matanui online game is widely regarded as the thing that got people into the mysterious world of Bionicle. So in honor of Bionicle Day and the game's 25th anniversary, I want to go back and revisit this timeless classic. So no matter if you're a lifelong fan, a casual passerby, or someone who has never heard of Bionicle before this video, let me show you why this little Flash game means so much to me and so many other people out there. And it all starts, again, with those same gray canisters, but this time, not in the aisles of a toy store, but instead, washed ashore on a beach. At its core, the Matanui online game, or MNOG as I will be calling it from now on, is a point-and-click adventure game similar to games like Monkey Island or Telltale's The Walking Dead. Now, if you're part of the brain-rotted short-form content-consuming Gen Alpha kids that make up 10% of my audience, you very likely don't even know what a point-and-click adventure game even is, given that the genre has been dormant for a very, very long time. Essentially, these types of games play like an interactive comic book. Instead of being able to move in real time and freely interact with the world around you, you click through a variety of different screens instead, each of them having a certain amount of objects or items or people inside of them. Oftentimes, these screens have an objective associated with them where you have to either combine two items together or solve a puzzle to progress. Character interactions are also much deeper and a lot more focused on long, branching dialogue sequences that can offer clues about what to do or where to go next. But you gotta remember that the key word here is can. Point-and-click games have a reputation for being needlessly obtuse, cryptic, and difficult to complete. Especially some of the older titles often demand an extremely large amount of self-sufficient thinking from the player, which is good, don't get me wrong, but the execution is where it often starts to fall apart. Quest items are often placed in strange and unexpected areas, sometimes even purposely blending in with the background for artificial difficulty. And NPCs just talk strangely and are vague posting at you in an attempt to be all mysterious and intriguing, but just end up being annoying and unhelpful. These are the most common issues that players have with this genre, and even some of the most well-regarded games in it still fall victim to these tropes. Which is exactly why MNOG is so impressive, because it largely manages to avoid all of these issues that I just mentioned. The fact that this game was attached to a kid's toy line required it to be relatively easy in order to make sure the kids could, actually beat the video game. And so the design had to follow suit, streamlining and simplifying a few elements that otherwise could cause lots of frustration in players. Dialogue is a very good example, as it is noticeably shorter than in other point-and-click games and more to the point. But a simple dialogue structure does not automatically mean simple writing. Each piece of dialogue is really meaningful, and every new conversation teaches you something new about the island of Mata Nui, its inhabitants, and the mysterious Toa, elemental warriors that have been sent to the island for an unknown reason. This not only keeps the dialogue short and sweet, but also makes you more likely to, actually pay attention to what's being said, rather than just skipping through all the dialogue and then being left confused afterwards. It's not perfect, obviously. Some parts of the game are still a bit unintuitive and would have greatly benefited from more signposting, but that is also largely because of the sheer amount of freedom that MNOG gives you. As soon as you wake up on that iconic beach, most of the world map is already open to you, with 4 of the 6 main regions being accessible right from the get-go. This allows you to really get immersed within this world as you travel through the island's varied and beautiful biomes and you slowly start to uncover their secrets. This is some pretty intricate design for a children's game, letting you just freely explore an island while at the same time silently guiding you to the next clue that you need to progress. And there is a very good reason as to why the game was designed this way. During MNOG's production, the developers, the New York-based Templar Studios, were throwing around ideas on how to best present the world of Bionicle in an interactive way. Now, Templar and LEGO are no strangers to each other, as the two companies have collaborated on a few games before this point, but never something so big and story-focused as MNOG. And so seeing how badly LEGO needed a hit, this one had to be different. They knew they couldn't just tell the whole story throughout this one game, as LEGO's marketing leaned on drip-feeding bits and pieces of lore through a variety of different platforms. So, Templar got creative and looked towards one specific game for inspiration that had captivated them just a few years prior. Myst, and by extension its sequel Riven, are some of the most influential PC games of all time. What Doom was for the Windows PC, Myst was for the Mac. A groundbreaking, must-play title that inspired countless clones and continues to inspire developers to this very day. When Myst launched in 1993, it became an instant classic, selling 6 million copies over the next few years, which at the time was just simply unheard of. So unheard of, in fact, that Myst held the title as the best-selling PC game for almost a decade. These two games were the true start of what some people like to call the Metroidvania, a subgenre of the Metroidvania that recently has gotten a lot more popular. The main difference between these two genres is that instead of progressing via the use of items or a permanent upgrade to your character, you instead need to acquire specific knowledge. And not in the cliche way of a codex entry or a lore page, no, I mean actual, genuine information about the game's mechanics that you simply did not know before. The two best modern examples of such games are Outer Wilds and Tunic, both games that deliberately obfuscate vital information in order to further a sense of discovery and mysticism. Technically speaking, you can beat Outer Wilds within 20 minutes, but the knowledge that you need in order to do so will not reveal itself to you unless you thoroughly explore the game's world first. This is what makes these games so special. There is a reason why Outer Wilds is in so many people's best games of all times lists. The feeling of discovery, of unraveling a mystery, is exactly what made Myst such a generational hit back in '93. And it is that exact same vibe that Templar wanted to capture with MNOG. If you would ask any Bionicle fan about what the best part of the universe is, I am sure they would almost certainly say the world. The many different islands that are home to Bionicle's story are incredible places, crafted with so much love and detail that people are still fascinated by them even to this very day. No matter if it's an old commercial or the box art of the actual toys themselves, the way that the island of Mata Nui was depicted is dripping in mystique. They weren't just pieces of art. They were portals into a vast and seemingly infinite world packed with so much to discover that you could get lost in it for hours. And Templar knew this, because the best parts of MNOG are the ones without any words spoken at all. Even 25 years later, MNOG still looks like a work of art and hasn't aged a day. Seriously, you could pick any still image from this game and hang it up in an art museum, it's that good. Templar made sure that every single location in the game would further that sense of discovery and mysticism that LEGO wanted to achieve with Matanui, and holy shit did they pull it off well. Each frame of MNOG's distinct locations evokes so many emotions in you and always carry that small beckoning hand that just makes you want to get lost in them. The lively and secluded water village of Ga Koro, where you can hear the sound of waves crashing against the beachfront. The seemingly endless spans of the Pokoro Desert with its massive mountains and meticulously crafted stone carvings. The royal and intimidating castle walls of Ta Koro, bustling with guards and townsfolk preparing for the many threats that the island throws their way. The gloomy yet beautiful underground passages of Onu Koro, illuminated via light stones and home to a massive excavation and research project nearing a breakthrough. These are just a few of the main locations that you will be visiting during your playthrough, and all of them are pure works of art. Dripping with atmosphere, gorgeously illustrated and supported by Justin Luchter's masterful soundtrack, which still absolutely hits today in spite of the very subpar audio quality in 2001. Every single artist that worked on this game, no matter how small their contributions, should be extremely proud of what they made here. MNOG is one of the prettiest video games ever created, and the fact that all of this is inside a browser game from 2001 borders on black magic. Templar really pushed the boundaries of what the Flash player was capable at the time, and nowhere is that more apparent than in the game's big set-piece moments. These usually happen after completing a major quest chain and either take the form of a minigame or a long animation, sometimes even a mix of both. And these are just incredible, especially given the fact that Templar was under some pretty serious development guidelines. Due to the company's family-friendly image, LEGO's marketing team prohibited any depictions of either violence or weaponry for the bionicle brand, which is pretty damn debilitating if you're making an action sci-fi universe, and so, once again, the designers had to get creative. The action scenes in MNOG go way harder than they have any right to be. They are extremely deliberate in what they do and don't show, so even without any weapon-on-person contact, they feel weighty and exciting. They also perfectly work around Flash's limitations, with some fantastic animation work that makes the choppy 17 FPS limit come across as more of a stylistic choice rather than a compromise. No matter where you are in the game, the level of artistry on display here never lets up. Even the minigames, which are usually the low point of any game like this, are really well designed and quite enjoyable. Yeah, they're pretty simple, but that's all they really need to be. They're short, fun, and add some really nice variety to the gameplay loop, which keeps the game fresh all throughout its 2 to 3 hour runtime. MNOG may be a pretty short game, but those 2 to 3 hours are filled to the brim with content to make sure that there is always something interesting to do or to see. Be it you solving a switch puzzle in the Onukoro tunnels, uncovering the mystery of the illness befalling Pokoro, or watching an epic fight between the beast-like Rahi animals and one of the legendary Toa, MNOG keeps you engaged all the way through, and I absolutely love it for that. But past all the beautiful visuals and enjoyable gameplay, there is one massive factor that is the reason this game is still so fondly remembered to this day, and that is its story. The story and lore of Bionicle is ridiculous. It's genuinely insane how much the writers at LEGO crammed into this toy line. That is not to say the story is bad, far from it actually. But accurately retelling it is an absolutely Herculean task that requires comics, books, 4 whole movies, a dozen or so video games, and multiple fan forum threads to fully piece together. I'm sure that at one point or another you've heard of one of these 2 videos somewhere on the internet, and no, that runtime is not inflated at all. It genuinely takes that long to explain all this bullshit. But thankfully, by this point, we're still in 2001. And while internally, the writers have already prepared a good chunk of the behemoth that the Bionicle story would become, we first had to get there. In fact, MNOG was actually not supposed to be the main event at all. Its original intention was just to be another way for kids to get into the story, a gateway drug, so to speak. Another piece of the marketing puzzle designed to get them to rush into the nearest toy store and buy all the characters that they all had learned so much about. And so during development, Templar approached the game exactly like this. In fact, according to the studio head, Peter Mack, they thought that MNOG was more of an afterthought for LEGO, a small footnote in the massive marketing campaign that the company had in mind. And in a way, they were actually correct. Originally, LEGO planned to release 2 more Bionicle games in 2001 alongside MNOG, Quest for the Toa and The Legend of Mata Nui. These 2 games were supposed to be the main attractions, the things that would get people into this world and would make it a global sensation. Out of these 2 titles, Quest for the Toa was a lot smaller in scale, an isometric action platformer for the Game Boy Advance where you play as Matoran, who are the denizens of the 6 villages on the island. The game was extremely simple and honestly it was pretty mediocre, but it wasn't intended to be a blockbuster hit. That honor would go to The Legend of Mata Nui, a massive 3D action-adventure game striking the same chords as something like Ocarina of Time. LEGO had huge plans for the game. A fully explorable open world, 6 playable characters in the form of the Toa, and an epic story that would seamlessly transition into the 2002 wave of Bionicle. An incredibly ambitious project that almost immediately went up in flames. After a hellish development cycle, The Legend of Mata Nui was ultimately cancelled in October of 2001. Just a few short months after the launch of the Toa sets. However, while working on MNOG, Templar didn't know about any of these development troubles and therefore weren't given a lot to work with from LEGO. A rough story bible and a temporary design document were all that they had access to, and so the actual story of the Toa was as much a mystery to them as it was to us. But once again, the studio's incredibly talented developers and artists managed to pull it off regardless and were able to craft a story that can easily stand on its own 2 feet. You play as an unknown Matoran who washes up on the shore of Mata Nui without any prior memories of what happened before you came here. Immediately, your eyes fall on a massive grey canister that has seemingly been busted open. Whatever was inside, now gone. To your right, a path towards a volcanic area with a large, imposing castle looming in the distance. To your right, a blue Matoran next to a boat, waving nervously trying to get your attention. Naturally, you walk up to the stranger, a Matoran named Maku, who tells you that their village is being attacked by the ferocious Rahi, beast-like creatures and the native animals of the island. They've been acting strangely for the past couple of weeks, being unusually aggressive towards the Matoran and frequently attacking other villages for seemingly no reason. And so, your objective is clear. Help the villagers, figure out why the Rahi are so aggressive, and what role these canisters could possibly play in all of this. What follows is an absolutely incredible tale of discovery, intrigue, revelations, legends, and friendship that is just such a joy to experience. Even though this game is intended for kids, it never feels childish or overly simplistic. The writing is great, with an absolutely delightful cast of characters, all of which having their own distinct personalities and ways of speech that makes them oh so likable. The deeper you go and the more you discover, the more you will appreciate this game's story and the more you will understand why this shit right here was so formative for many of us Bionicle fans. Each of MNOG's 9 chapters offers very interesting narratives that are all designed to slowly unravel the bigger picture. As you learn about the inhabitants of Mata Nui, you learn a lot about the world around them, their hobbies, cultures, and also burdens that they all carry within themselves. Templar's ability to make you care about these tiny robots that don't even have any facial features or proper voice acting just needs to be celebrated. The amount of love and care that went into each member of the cast is beyond anything I've seen in a licensed game, let alone one from 25 goddamn years ago. But don't be fooled into thinking that this game is all about sunshine and rainbows, because while MNOG is a very jovial game at heart, it also isn't afraid to get dark. After investigating a number of Rahi sightings across Mata Nui and meeting some of the Toa along the way, you discover that the reason why they're lashing out against the villagers is due to a strange sickness that is befalling the land. An illness that seems to infect the Rahi's masks, turning them into violent killing machines. Taraga Vakama, the village elder of Takoro, calls you aside to teach you about the supposed origin of this virus. Something as terrible and vile as this can only come from one place. The evil Makuta must be behind this. Makuta is one of the most fascinating characters in the entire Bionicle universe, twin brother to the great spirit Mata Nui, after which the island you're on is named after. According to the legend, Mata Nui descended from the heavens, creating life as we know it. He created both the 6 Matoran tribes as well as the Toa, his warriors and envoys of his will. Makuta saw what great power Mata Nui had and was consumed by jealousy, leading him to put a great curse onto his brother, sending him into an eternal slumber. With the great spirit out of commission, Makuta began creating life in his own image, wanting to override what his brother had created, as according to him, He should be the sole ruler of the world. Only with the combined power of the 6 Toa can he be defeated and Matanui's consciousness restored. The way Makuta is depicted changes quite substantially as the bionicle story goes on, but for a lot of people, MNOG's interpretation of the character is one of the best, and I very much agree. First of all, there is his design. A mass of black tendrils and random Lego pieces makes him look unknowable, almost eldritch in a way. He can take the form of basically anything, and so the fact that he chooses to represent himself as a simple Matoran gives even more weight to his presence. And then there is his dialogue, possibly the single best piece of writing in the entire game. An incredible monologue that doesn't frame him as a mustache-twirling villain, but describes him as a sort of force of nature. A necessary evil that is required for the universe to exist, as without him, life simply wouldn't have come into existence at all. For every ray of light shining through the clouds must also cast a shadow that shrouds the ground in darkness. Makuta is yin, and Matanui is yang. I know that this tone shift might seem sudden to some of you, especially given that all the other chapters had a mostly positive and lighthearted tone to them. But there's a very good reason as to why MNOG gets so dark in the last act, and for that, we have to look at the time period this game was made in. Because MNOG's episodes were released periodically with a new one dropping every 1 or 2 months, the last chapters were heavily inspired by the massive tragedy that was the 9/11 terrorist attacks. Templar Studios were and still are based in New York City and were working in extremely close proximity to the World Trade Center at the time. But instead of pausing development to recover from the insanity they had just witnessed, that event simply pushed them deeper into their work as a form of escapism. And as they were wrapping up the story and began to work on the big confrontation with Makuta, Templar wanted to make that moment really special. At the end, it was time to draw out the main theme that had been with us since the beginning. The story was about a battle, but between who? Violence for us had a different meaning. Good and evil just wasn't good enough anymore. It didn't make any sense anymore, but that was okay, because from the beginning, that's not what it was about. The Makuta wasn't evil and his brother Matanui wasn't good. We knew that while building was fun, it was just as much fun to destroy. They were two sides of the same coin and neither were wrong. It was all part of the play, part of learning, part of having fun. Not good or evil. Creation and destruction, equal powers in the universe, natural and necessary. Both good, both bad, both neither. It's true, we painted destruction a bit more negatively, using words like infected mask or monsters, but we needed the conflict. So the Makuta, for all its darkness and danger, was not evil after all, and he says as much at the end. The final act was the confrontation, not between good and evil, which was meaningless, but between creation and destruction, where everything comes from nothing and goes back to it eventually. This was the struggle between the Toa and the Rahi, Matanui and Makuta, and the Lego fan and her kid brother, building and smashing happily in equal measure. Our world had gone a bit mad, but to us, this helped make some sense of it. We wanted to share what small comfort it brought. The Matanui online game is an absolute gem and one of my favorite video games of all time. Bionicle has been such a formative part of my childhood, and even now I am still a massive fan of both the toys and the universe that surrounds them. There will likely never be anything like it again, and I think that the failed 2015 reboot of the franchise very much proved that. Deep down, I do want it back, yeah, but I also know that it simply will not have the same impact that it had back then. New gen kids probably wouldn't care a lot, and the diehard fans that would actually buy them is simply not big enough for LEGO to fully commit to a whole new third generation. But honestly, and it kinda hurts to say this, but it's probably for the best to leave Bionicle dormant. So many legendary franchises get dug up all the time with uninspired and lazy projects that just exist to milk any remaining money from the nostalgia-blinded fans. Sure, it sucks that LEGO doesn't even consider Bionicle for any of their products, even if they are aimed at evoking nostalgia, but at least I know that they won't tarnish the memory of this beloved piece of their history. A history that games like MNOG have helped turn into a legacy, casting a wide shadow over an entire generation of kids that got utterly consumed by this mysterious and strange world. Kids like me, who are now 24 years old and love these little toy robots so much that they now make way too long videos about them on the internet. And you know what? I would do it again in a heartbeat, because Bionicle deserves this. Because MNOG deserves this.